So, who is Max Shufton?
Sure. So I am the director of mission programs and partnerships at SANS. SANS is a global cybersecurity training provider, but my role at SANS is leading an organization focused on solving a few problems. One, and most prominently, kind of the cybersecurity talent gap, identifying ways we could build programs that bring more people into cybersecurity now from non-traditional backgrounds, and then also how we can build programs that inspire young people, especially high school age students, to pursue careers in cybersecurity.
What brought you to this initiative?
Yeah. So years ago, kind of the government and national security for an organization called Cambridge Global Advisors, which was really focused on supporting organizations like Homeland Security, government contractors, and other groups in terms of like their cybersecurity, business development, public affairs, things of that nature. And one of our clients was the SANS Institute, which at the time was running a competition for veterans, unemployed people, and high school students called Cyber Aces, focused on providing them free learning in fundamentals of IT like networking, system administration, and operating systems. And in that program, people who did really well in the free training and on the quizzes sometimes got scholarships to do cyber ranges or take training courses, certifications, and we got to see some really cool outcomes. People who, were exiting the military, who didn't have a background in cyber, that did this program back then called the Cyber Aces State Championships, would end up going through training and multiple industry certs and get jobs in the field. And being a part of that, I loved it. And eventually, instead of just, SANS being a client, I was able to in them full time to really start to build out more programs that had that same mission of how can we help people not in security get a career path into it.
How long are these programs when someone joins?
Yeah, so that's definitely fine. But traditionally today, we focus on kind of what we call a RESC, so an adult looking to move into security and get a job, a 5 to 6 month program. And then if we have, programs aimed more at high schoolers, they're probably running a couple years as they complete their high school education, get a degree or diploma, and, then obviously are moving on to other things. So in terms of the kind of immersive 2-job program, it's usually 5 to 6 months.
And what kind of time commitment are we looking at here? These full day courses, I'm assuming for the looking to reskill. And then also for the high school students, they have an entire workload they need from school in of itself.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one reason we space them out. So, SANS training is offered in boot camp style where it's all day long for 6 days. But for the reskilling academies for adults, we typically approach them differently. The reason we give students 6 months is so they have about 2 months each per taking one training course and one industry certification. Each of the courses is about 40 hours of content. And then they need to spend about 60 hours to up to 80 studying for the cert. So you're looking at 100 to 120 hour commitment every 2 months. So obviously, if you break that down by week, around 15 hours a week, which makes it more manageable because folks do have other priorities with, work, family, et cetera. From a high school standpoint, we've approached these programs differently because we're not expecting them obviously to get jobs when they're 16 or 17. It's we use, and we don't use traditional industry training. We use gamification. So the student kind of chooses how much time they put into it. We would typically advise a student they want, they'll usually get 6 months just to play what we call CyberStart, which is a game that introduces them to things like Linux and forensics. And they solve challenges to move to the next levels of the game. But we usually advise them they're spending, 5 to 10 hours a week kind of trying to play the game on average if they really invested. But some folks will just spend an hour or two a week and they can still become kind of cyber aware out of it at that level of participation.
What does the curriculum look like for these kinds of things? Because based on talent shortages that have surfaced over the last few months for me, is I have a lot that are so focused on telling me what tools they can use as opposed to understanding the core fundamentals of how to be effective in the cybersecurity field, landscape, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is a challenge. And so the way we approach reskilling, students start with something, a course first called Foundations, which isn't really tool specific. It's much more focused on, if you think of you have to go to medical school, you need to know anatomy before you go to medical school. And that's what this set of training modules really is focused on. So they get introduced to things like computer hardware, how to build a computer, introduced to Linux in a browser, in which they're, doing labs on a terminal that's based in a browser. So they don't have to get really advanced with Kali Linux or virtual machines, they can learn the basics of Linux command lines, in their browser. They get introduced to kind of security concepts like cryptography, and things of that, and encryption, as well as introduced to networking and servers and those types of IT areas that really relate to security. So they can get those foundations and have them. And then usually when folks go into the more advanced training, then they can kind of try to start specializing, whether it's in incident handling or forensics or offensive operations. They've got that base set of knowledge that you need to succeed in that more advanced training.
Okay. Now, where do we find these classes? Is there a link?
Yeah, so if you just went to SANS.org, click Find Training, and kind of see our whole curriculum. If you went for these programs in particular, if you went to SANS.org/mission, you'll see lots of programs, scholarship academies, HBCU academies, women's academies, all linked to from there. And those go to these types of programs where we're focused on that reskilling. So SANS overall has about 70 courses, and that would be certainly a long list to review. But if you go to that SANS.org/mission page, you'll find these particular programs where the curriculum's outlined on each one. That's more tailored to that new to cyber individual.
Who's your core demographic for this? I know it's everyone, but obviously certain people, or I guess what's the core skill that you think would make someone good in the cybersecurity world if they were still late coming from, say, being a cashier somewhere, wanted to get in?
Yeah. So what I always say is there's two sides of it. One is kind of aptitude, and what we mean in solver, someone who's curious, who like to say when they were younger, build puzzles or take apart toys and see how you put them back together. Having that mindset of trying to understand the way things work together. Critical thinker and all of those things are some of the key traits. But that's not the only one. You can have great technical aptitude and still struggle in cybersecurity. You certainly need to have soft skills, especially communications. Both you're going to have to work with business people.
We're IT people have interpersonal skills. Come on, that's why we got into IT.
It is a great line and one I've heard many times. But at the end of once you're in a SOC, or maybe you're in a security awareness type of role, or you're in a risk compliance role, you're going to have to communicate with folks on the business side, folks in other departments, and people on your team that come from different backgrounds. And so having good communication skills is essential. So that's important. And the last one I'd say is tenacity is probably the best word. This is, a challenging field and it's ever evolving. So even through this training program, you'll gain the skills needed to get an initial job, but you're going to have to keep learning to stay on, of new threats, new techniques, as well as, try to evolve into a larger career role.
So how long has this program been going on for?
Been running different skilling programs since about 2015.
You've got about 7 years or so worth of people that have come through. What is the demographic breakdown? And the reason I ask this question is I'm trying to help people understand that it doesn't matter who you are. If you want to do something, you can move to that position, especially in cybersecurity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the demographic range, I don't have the numbers top of my head, try to throw any random numbers out there, but
someone in the comments will say you were wrong anyway, even if you had the right numbers. So
what I can say is it's been extraordinarily diverse in terms of gender and racial and ethnic background. We have specific programs for these academies that are literally called the Women's Scholarship Academy, the Diversity Cyber Academies, and the Vet Success Academy. So obviously each with a very focus, to bring more people that don't look like me into cybersecurity. Those programs together have had close to 1,000 people through them in the US over the last 7 years. The reason I don't have all the demographics at the top of my mind is because we've had another 700 with partner programs of this nature in Canada and the United Kingdom. But those programs have also had a focus on diversity, like the programs we support in Canada, which are under the banner of a group called the Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst. Their focus is having about 700 Canadians reskilled over 4 years. They just started about 2.5 years ago. And their demographic focus is about 50% of those will be women, 25% will be new Canadian citizens, and 25% will kind of be career changers that could come from. Cool. And so, yeah, we've seen great diversity, and folks come from, and then the other dimensions Also started more in the last 2 years working with historically Black colleges and universities to see if we could kind of be a bridge for students graduating those universities to come into cybersecurity.
So from 2010 to 2015, my company ran a program where if you were Rotary, we would train you on help desk. It was very informal. A lot of it was shoot from the hip. It was more so to just get them to understand process workflow and how to begin help, at least in the IT space, not even cyber. And what we would do is instead of placing them at a company and charging the company for them, we would introduce them to some of our clients who needed internal help and just let them be a direct hire. Nothing for us. It was purely just help them get on their feet after the military. So the biggest question I got from employers was, why should we hire them? So I guess it was, why should employers hire people that graduate from your reskilling programs?
Yeah, no, great question. Two things come to mind for me is, they're getting hands-on skills training you can get in cybersecurity to start out their skill base, that can obviously develop in their new job. Traditionally in these programs, we've seen about 9 into the graduates get jobs within 6 months in cyber. And that's because they have the, industry credentials and the skill set to be able to perform an entry-level job on day one. Secondly, I would put more towards the companies of, we all recognize there's this huge cybersecurity gap or talent shortage. CyberSeek puts it as, I think, around 600,000, open vacant jobs in the U.S. each year right now.
Those are inaccurate, honestly.
Candidly, I would say it's in terms of certainly in the hundreds of thousands. Employers regularly have more open vacancies than they can fill in cybersecurity each year, and that seems to be qualitatively what we hear from every company we talk to. Whether that adds up to 600,000 in the U.S. right now, I wouldn't put my money behind that. But there are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs open. And the plan of just going on LinkedIn to find people with certifications work companies will not lessen that gap. It simply creates another vacancy somewhere else. And the best way to shorten that gap is to find the people who have that tenacity, who have that aptitude, and have those soft skills that can move into cybersecurity. And using programs like this one or others where they exist to bring new people in and, give them the opportunity to grow in your company at a good cybersecurity role.
One of the issues that I've seen over the last couple of years, mostly in the municipalities that I've seen this, is instead of paying someone what I would consider a lot of these municipalities, and probably SMB and certain enterprise, they will go hire someone with no experience, no training to fill these cybersecurity roles, and it ends up causing more problems than anything. So how does the reskilling program handle that qualitative aspect of filling these, just throwing more bodies at a problem that are untrained?
Yeah. So from our standpoint, we have a rigorous, what I would call admissions process for who sees scholarships or enrolls in these types of programs. And when we work with partners, we make sure there's something there as well, so that the employer knows the individual selected didn't just take training, and come away with little applicable knowledge or practical skills. So in the front end of the process, usually individuals have to take an aptitude assessment that measures kind of their problem solving, critical thinking skills, some of those core traits of cyber aptitude. And then beyond that, they have to usually either submit some kind of video recording, of answering to a questionnaire, or actually do a live interview to try to gauge that tenacity, that motivation, and that passion. Because to be successful, and communication skills, because certainly to be successful, you need to have the aptitude, but also those other traits. And then in addition to going through the training courses as they go through this type of program, we have technical mentors that consider groups of students going through it together, so they can check in with them regularly to be sure they're on track. They're actually digesting the material, understanding the skills they're learning, completing their labs. And then finally, at the end of each track of the program or each course, they have to take an industry certification to prove the skills they've learned, so that the employer knows they're getting, someone who has real abilities, new abilities that have been proven and validated, that they can trust on day one, and that we're not, just having people sit in a room for 6 days and then throwing them into a SOC with no idea what to do.
Now, would these be SANS certifications, or is this really preparing them to go out and take whatever they need or afford?
So in our, since it's, scholarship based, or if they're, self-funding, we do have some on the college side that do that, but our majority are scholarship based. They are taking SANS GX certifications. Okay. Many of the students, anecdotally, certainly in these programs, have used those skills to go take some of the, vendor certs like a Splunk certification or a Cisco certification, or, going to get a Security Plus that's low cost because they probably already, through the SANS training, attained the skill set needed to be well prepared for those certifications. They might have to get some books, to touch up on some niche areas. But so a lot of our students will come out with 2 to 3 of the SANS GX certs and then go pursue some other certs on their own and usually come back to SANS GX in the long term as they get into that career to get more advanced industry certifications as well.
Are these reskilling programs limited to fresh face in the industry, or can for a long time, and let's say they were a programmer and they wanted to get into cyber, can they take this course, or are there other courses meant for people like that?
Yeah, good question. I'll give you a couple answers. So the way we restructured our reskilling program, scholarship based, they are limited to individuals not currently working in cybersecurity. If you were a programmer, you would be eligible. We usually, especially based on, how many seats we have available for each cohort, will give priority to those not in IT at all, who might be coming from a lower wage. But, programmers, network analysts would be certainly eligible. We've also started a couple of what we call upskilling programs, which are actually really intended for those in IT and programming so that they can, pivot into cybersecurity, because they usually don't need to take that kind of foundations training I talked about maybe, say, 10 minutes ago, right? They know what a CPU is.
I think there's a lot of people in the industry that should probably take your reskilling program so they can actually know what they're doing. I say that with peace and love, but it sounds like it would be a really nice pre-wet for life in IT, not even cyber, because I can't tell you how many times I've walked into situations with other IT providers, internal IT, and they don't know. Basically, it's muscle memory because someone showed them how to do something, but they don't know why. So I think a program like this would be fantastic for anyone, whether it's upskilling or reskilling. How does... I'm sorry, good.
It is. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to expand on that a minute. I mean, we have, in terms of our reskilling, it's usually scholarships funded by SANS or various partners working with nonprofits, state governments, federal governments, with grants, things like that. So we often have criteria limiting who participates from those programs standpoint. There is a SANS.edu college that has a kind of a reskilling program called an undergraduate certificate. Obviously, it's a great fit for somebody working in IT. It has a cost to it, right? It's a self-funded program. I think overall it's about $17,000. So it's much like a boot camp school, but with kind of the SANS design. And then at the same time, SANS obviously is a training business. We have companies that put people through learning paths like this so that they can get into this space. But from the mission standpoint, we do usually put some criteria up around, because we want those scholarships to usually go towards folks not in security yet. Sometimes they go towards folks in IT, sometimes individuals who are in physical therapy, a bartender, etc.
How much is the program without the scholarship?
Without the scholarship, that they get would come out to about $25,000 US.
Okay, so it's substantial. It's not one of these $500 courses where you get a Canva certificate. Okay,
no, correct. This is that the U.S. military uses for some of its cyber teams, down at Fort Gordon, that some of our larger federal agencies and law enforcement use for their own cyber professionals. These are the industry training courses and certifications that align to like the Department of Defense. They have something called 8140 that help qualify you for defense cybersecurity roles.
How do employers get access to your graduates? Because it's one thing to put them through the pipe. Ideally, you'd like to get everyone hired. That process work. So
we have a career center that kind of manages the career placement for both all our reskilling scholarship students, as well as students in that SANS.edu undergraduate certificate coming out. And they can just email hiring talent, one word together, hiring talent @SANS.org. And it redirects to the career center team. And we do not charge placement fees or anything like that for hiring students from these.
Now, when an employer hires someone that comes out of one of these programs for continuing education, because I hate to say this, but I think the IT/cybersecurity field changes faster than any other industry out there. Just from threats, best practices, or what have you. Is there a pathway for people to have continuing education, or is that where they go and they sign up on their own, or their employers send them through SANS training?
Yeah, this is where we would put the impetus on employers to support the continued development of students. From our perspective, we do have some limited things, like we'll often offer, some alumni discount codes periodically for students to use to get more training, rates and things like that. But our belief is certainly that as these students become professionals, take on well-paying jobs, doing real-world activities, defending against threats, the employer should continue development, be it through SANS or other training opportunities. They need to have that investment in training, and that's the message we'll carry with employers and to communicate to them as they hire as well or ask about it.
How often? Well, what's the schedule for these cohorts? Meaning, when do they start? Is it first of every month? Is it a demand and supply based schedule?
Yeah, it's a bit of an variance depending on the program. For our kind of Vet Success Women's Academy programs that SANS runs on our own, we typically have them start twice a year, once usually in the first half of the year and once again toward the end of the year. So like 2 cohorts per year. For some of the partnered programs, it does vary. There's some that are literally once a year. A program we have with women in cybersecurity called WESIS. Their security training scholarship is once a year. Then I could give you the example of our Cyber Workforce Academy in partnership with the Maryland Department of Labor. I think we probably have 4 to 5 cohorts start a year. So it does vary based on when we are involving other partners, based on obviously the audience they want to serve, how often they want to launch things, and so on.
Are these virtual or are these in person? Because I saw SANS in general had a huge social media kickoff saying you're back to live person events.
We did. These programs, they left pretty much all virtual. To the pandemic, we had several that, would often start in person with like their first course. People would get together, go to dinner and then kind of take that boot camp style and then go remote. But we found from student feedback, even as SANS writ large returned to in-person training, that students in these programs really love the virtual aspect. Sometimes they'll take what we call on-demand, which is your self-paced virtual training. Sometimes they'll take live online, which is literally just like a boot camp, except from your computer at home. And the ability to be at home, especially because they're reskilling, they're often, part-time students somewhere else, or they're working. So, they're balancing a lot of things. Having that be an asynchronous program in terms of learning, but with, actual deadlines with their mentors or certification exams has seemed to be a good balance for us in terms of how we structure them.
The people who take this course and they're able to do it on their own, the deadlines that are imposed by SANS, do you see them as being more successful in the long run? Because to me, that shows that they have pretty good time management, as opposed to being in a set curriculum, doing it on their own and hitting your time goals.
Yeah, we see that those who are, if I understood correctly, are, meeting their deadlines, certifications in the time that we set out for them, and kind of following a path, are very successful in the long term. They're showing obviously the aptitude and, new skills by achieving the certifications, but they're also showing that organization, that, commitment to the program, their passion for the industry by meeting all the benchmarks and achieving them. And achieving 3 SANS GX certifications in 6 months is no easy feat. A professional would say that themselves. And the fact that these folks are jumping into the field by doing that, I think speaks to, their tenacity and their capability.
How many slots for each class are there? I know they're different classes, but typically.
A cohort, we try to have a group of about 15 to 20 students start together. Because we'll have one mentor assigned to them. They're able to, at that level, still build a bit of a one-on-one relationship with the mentor, but also meet each other and not kind of be lost in the sea, but also not have it so small where, if they aren't an extrovert, they're not, feeling too put out or anything. It seems that's a good balance for us. We've done cohorts under 10, we've done cohorts over 40, and those have not worked as well as that kind of 15 to 20 range.
And because life happens, as we saw with, the recent COVID, if someone has to roll back, is that a possibility? Meaning some life-changing incident came back and they can't continue with the class. Can they go back to another, can they get rolled back to another class that starts later?
Yeah, absolutely. A student in there's a program called the Virginia Cyber Skills Academy, state government, where a student had, I think, with a family illness and, had to just take a pause. So they paused after completing their first track, the foundations course and that certification, and they'll come back when they're ready in the future to complete the program and hopefully get a job.
Okay. That's it for me. I don't have any more questions. Anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I think, I would just say, I think we found that there's, so many studies, so much news on the problem we all face with the cybersecurity talent shortage. And I think we've observed both, working on our own, but also working with lots of partners and seeing other organizations in this space doing some similar things, that if you can find people outside of cybersecurity, you can fill a lot of those open jobs. If they have that aptitude, that pen and commitment, they can, take advanced training, or starting with foundations, but get through advanced training and gain their credentials and skills needed to get a job and perform it. And we hope to work with more organizations to address that problem and replicate the solution.
Fantastic. How can the people reach out to you if you even want to hear from them?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to SANS.org/mission, again, you'll see tons of information about all these programs. And I don't keep my email secret. It's my first initial M and then my last name, Shufton @SANS.org, and always happy to, engage in a conversation.